Ambassador David Friedman, shalom.
Shalom, Yoni. Good to be with you.
Thank you for coming to our studio. You know, we know that many believe in the idea of sovereignty, Israeli sovereignty in Judea and Samaria for reasons of history, of faith, of it belongs to us. In your book, One Jewish State, you're saying that this is the solution for the area, for the problems. Explain.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you are, deeply religious and believe in the God-given sovereignty of the Jewish people over the land of Israel, the entire land of Israel, this book is for you. On the other hand, if you're an atheist, if you're someone who really sides with the interests of the Palestinian people, this book is also for you.
How could that be?
Well, because we start off with the working assumption, which I think by now should be everyone's assumption, which is that there can't be a two-state solution, right? I mean, we tried that experiment in Gaza, right? There hasn't been a Jew living in Gaza for 17, 18 years. There hasn't been Israeli soldier on the ground since after October 7th. It's beautiful territory. It's open to the sea. It's western-facing Mediterranean, same beachfront as Tel Aviv. Billions of dollars of assistance came in, and the Palestinians in Gaza elected Hamas, and then the money went to essentially build terror tunnels and weapons of mass destruction. That was the experiment. It failed, okay? And I think people need to recognize, if they're at all honest, that the two-state solution failed. Here was a try. People tried. Maybe they meant well, maybe they didn't, but whatever happened, it failed. Mm-hmm. Okay, now what do we do from here? Where do we go from here? So we have Judea and Samaria, right, where people are not suffering. I mean, it's not a war zone. It's got problems, but it's not a war zone. And we're now, let's say, collecting resumes, if you will, of who should really have sovereignty over this territory. And of course, we just saw, Abu Mazen with his memorial service for Yahya Sinwar. So we know where they stand. We know that after October 7th, 80% of the Palestinians living in Judea and Samaria supported what Hamas did. Mm-hmm. Okay, so they're out. Okay, they're disqualified. You can only rehabilitate them so much. I mean, the New York Times 10 years ago said that Abu Mazen had disqualified himself by basically blaming the Jews for the Holocaust. But they keep getting more and more chances. I think that's up. So now we're collecting resumes. Syria, no. Lebanon, no. Jordan, no. Egypt, no. These are all failed states. What about Israel?
Well, but before Israel, yeah. I must ask you, as someone who was part of the Abraham Accords, how about those countries, the Arab countries of the Gulf?
Well, they can help, but they're not going to be sovereigns from so far away. They have no historical basis for sovereignty, and I think they can perform a helpful role. But it's got to be someone, first of all, who's got a track record of empowering, an Arab minority within an area where the only successful nation is Israel. So, what I point out in the book is 20% of Israel inside the Green Line is Arab. More than 20% of the students in all the elite universities in Israel are Arab. Christian Arabs have the highest standard of living of any ethnic group in Israel, including Jews. Mm-hmm. And it just works. I mean, I have a dear friend who's a former chairman of Bank Leumi, the largest bank in Israel, who's a Israeli, Muslim, and it works. It works inside of Israel, and it can be those values can be exported to Judea and Samaria in a way that obviously deals with security.
So someone would ask you, okay, so you're talking about a one-state solution. But what many claim is that if it's the one state, it's not one Jewish state, just because of demographics.
Right. Well, it's got to be one Jewish state because, first of all, that's the law of the parliament. Right. There is a nation-state law that their collective right of self-determination in Israel belongs to the Jewish people. So, as I point in the book, there needs to be one Jewish state, just one. One Jewish state the size of about New Jersey. There's about 40 Muslim states. There are Christian states, Buddhist states, Hindu states, many, many states with national religions. Not America, okay? America was built differently, but lots of states with national religions. Nobody cares. Why can't there be just be one Jewish state? And I think that has to be the beginning value. That has to be the North Star of the state of Israel, that there's going to be one Jewish state, and people need to kind of live with it. And then beyond that, but you can move beyond that to what I say is, okay, let's reconcile the nation-state law with the basic law of human dignity. Right? Just because it's a Jewish state doesn't mean that everybody who lives there doesn't have basic human rights. And so it's threading that needle. It's taking those two laws, the nation-state law and the basic law of human dignity, merging them and getting to a place where this overall Jewish state, it's Jewish, it will always be Jewish, but the people that live there, if they may not, they're living inside of a Jewish state, they have to accept that, but within that framework, they'll have better human rights, better religious freedoms, better economic opportunities, better healthcare, better education, far better than they would have under any other circumstances.
And you're saying that there's formats like that around the world, right, where people are citizens or have the right, but they're not fully part of the state.
Every country has its own story. Every country is subject to criticism and praise, depending upon how people look at it. But look, I mean, the United Arab Emirates has 1 million citizens, 9 million guest workers. It works. I mean, there's no reason to criticize them. It's a perfectly workable solution. There are lots of different structures, and I point out that in the United States, which nobody accuses of treating people unfairly or, God forbid, being an apartheid state. Well, the United States has full sovereignty over Puerto Rico, over Guam, over American Samoa. The people that live there are citizens of the United States. They don't vote in the Electoral College in the national elections. They vote locally. They have lots of local autonomy. They get benefits from their relationship with America, just like the Palestinian Arabs would get benefits from their relationship with Israel. Doesn't mean that it has to be identical. I mean, you can't let perfection, the quest for perfection, can't let it get in the way of the possible. I mean, it's just, we're not going to create this perfect, idyllic nirvana here. But by the way, no other country in the world has nirvana either. So I think it's the best outcome.
Now, you decided to translate the book to Hebrew. Why was it important for you to have audience also from the Hebrew readers?
Well, listen, if I could write this book in Hebrew, I would have written in Hebrew to start with, because I actually think the Israeli audience is more important. And I'll tell you why. If I went to President Trump the day after the election, assuming he wins, which, believe God willing he will, and I said to him, look, I have this idea. I wrote a book about it. It's about one Jewish state. It's about a one-state solution. I'd like you to consider it, right? The first question he would ask me is, well, what do the Israelis think? And I would say, well, at this point, I don't know. And he'd say, well, you're kind of wasting my time. Like, I'm not getting ahead of them. Why don't you figure out what they want and then come back to me and we'll see if it makes any sense. So the Israeli audience is the paramount audience because it's their country, it's their decision to make. And by the way, it's not an easy decision. I don't minimize the significance of the decision. It's a big lift to be sovereign over, a couple of million Palestinians who historically have been enemies. So it requires a lot of thought. It requires time. And ultimately, not to pile on, what happened with judicial reform, but that's not the pathway. I mean, this is not about let's get to 61 seats and try to ram this through because it'll fail. It's too big a decision. And I think you need to respect the views of people who feel differently and convince them, because I think the arguments really sell themselves. But to convince people, if I can I tell you a quick story about what really drove me to write this book? I was meeting with an Israeli high-tech entrepreneur in Tel Aviv, incredibly patriotic, very successful military career, very successful business career. We were talking some business, then we started talking politics. I asked him, what do you think about Judea and Samaria? And he said to me, well, I haven't been there since I was in the army. I don't want to rule over these people. I don't want my children to risk their lives for this. And I said to him, well, what's your religious orientation? He goes, I don't know. I'm certainly doubtful about, my parents are Holocaust survivors. I'm doubtful about God's role in all of this. I said, okay, let's just talk about a place rather than, talk about this generally. So I said, I picked a place. I said, let's talk about Shiloh. I said, do you know what happened in Shiloh? He says, well, remind me. I said, well, Shiloh it's an important place in the Bible. Joshua took the Jewish people, across the Jordan River. They parked in another place in Gilgal for 7 years. Then they came to Shiloh. They were there for almost 400 years. It was the Jerusalem before there was Jerusalem. And it's where Samuel the prophet was born. It's where Hannah taught the world how to pray. And he said, well, he was interested in that. What does that mean? So, well, the Jewish people in those days were a sacrificial society. They made sacrifices to communicate with God. So Hannah's, whispering was so unusual that the high priest, Eli Cohen, thought she was drunk, right? Anyway, I finished the story. And I said to him, so what do you think? He says to me, well, we have to keep it. And I said, what do you mean have to keep it? I said, I thought, you're secular, you're doubtful. The Bible, may not be written by God, He said, doesn't matter. I don't care who wrote the Bible. So the Bible is our book. It's our DNA. It's who we are. this is what sustained us for 3,000 years. We have to keep Shiloh. And I said, well, you understand, it's not just Shiloh. There's like 50 other places like this as well. He says, well, I guess we have to really try to keep it. And I said to him, but like 5 minutes ago, you were ready to give it away. He said, yeah, because nobody really made me think about it in those terms, and I really didn't know. And I said to myself, how do I scale this conversation? I can't have another million conversations like this, right? So I wrote the book. But that's the whole idea. I think if you ask an Israeli, again, I don't think left, right, middle, picture Palestinians marching into Shiloh or Beit El or Hebron, with pitchforks and
October
flames
7th style.
And destroying everything in sight. All connections of the 3,000 to 4,000-year-old history of the Jewish people, these places, just destroying everything in sight, like they do every few years to Kever Yosef, right? Who's okay with that? I think very few people. Mm-hmm. And so I think this is not a plan that gets executed tomorrow. I think it's an idea. I hope Israelis, read the book and think about it and start talking about it. It needs to be elevated within the national consensus. Look, it's the eastern border of the state of Israel. People got to deal with it.
We're recording this interview on the Jewish anniversary of October 7th. And as we look at this past year, in terms of the relations between the United States and Israel, it began with the don't of Biden, of course, targeting Iran and Hezbollah, but then all the pressures, the boycotts to some extent, but also the military cooperation like we saw just a few days ago in terms of the attack on Iran, of course, countering the Iranian attack. So are they our best friends now? Are they not? The United States of America.
They have provided good support on occasion. That support has been baked into the relationship between Israel and the United States for many years. There's this protocol called Juniper Cobra that I participated in, war games, planning out missile defense. That's been around. I mean, this is not something new. This is basically executing a plan that had been in place for many years. So I'm not sure that anyone gets credit for that. The militaries between America and Israel are very, very closely aligned. They really like each other, respect each other. But, when push comes to shove, I think America was not helpful. I think they were not helpful in micromanaging this war, showing up at the War Cabinet with Sullivan or Blinken or Austin every couple of weeks. I think withholding weapons, which they continue to do, by the way. There continues to be a backlog of weapons that were authorized by Congress that have not yet been delivered. So, I think that's clearly unconscionable. The way they dealt with the assault, the attack on Rafah was completely misguided. This whole idea about Kamala Harris. I've read the maps. You can't do it. Like the maps. Like I could have written that map on a napkin. Making believe that she had some real deep insight into this. She didn't. And Prime Minister Netanyahu, to his credit, did not listen to Harris or to Biden. The entry into Rafah was done, I think, with a massive minimalization of risk of human life. I think they did it very, very skillfully. And had they not done it, they would not have discovered any of the smuggling tunnels between Egypt and Hamas, and they wouldn't have killed Sinwar. So, the Biden administration has been wrong, and not helpful when it comes to Israel prosecuting this war. Had they not done this, I think the war would have been over sooner. And of course, you saw the article in the Wall Street Journal that Sinwar himself took great comfort in the criticism that that Biden and Harris were levying on Israel, and it actually kind of emboldened him to be tougher on the hostages. So again, I think when history looks at this, it may take a few years to really look back and get it right. I think it'll be clear that America did not serve Israel's interest well.
So as you are coming towards the elections, and we know, of course, who you support, what is your message regarding? Some people are saying Harris is dangerous to Israel. Is that bad?
I think it's that bad. I think it's worse. I think that Harris is there's what's in her heart, there's what's in her head, there's her competency level. It's clear she has no particular feelings of warmth towards Israel, towards the Jewish state. Her the depth of her knowledge of the subject matter is very shallow. Her competency to deal kind of on her feet, be decisive in ways that are important, to put, if you will, the fear of America in the hearts of our enemies. I don't think Iran, Russia, China are in any way concerned about what a Harris presidency would look like. And I think that when people say to me what's the most important thing for Israel in all of this, it's a strong America. If America is strong, Israel will be strong. If America is weak, then unfortunately people view Israel as being weak. Now look, Israel did some incredible things over the last couple of months, from the pagers to the walkie-talkies to the targeted killings to what they just did yesterday, or 2 days, yesterday, when it comes to the attack on Iran. It was incredible. And I can tell you that President Trump is very impressed, very, very impressed with the quality and the devotion and the courage and the patriotism of the Israeli people dealing with what they're dealing with. And I think he will undoubtedly be far more supportive, both in a kind of emotional way, but more importantly, in terms of tangible steps on the ground, enabling Israel to defeat its enemies and to extend the peace agreements that we made, from the Abraham Accords. I think all of that goes together.
Ambassador David Friedman, author of One Jewish State, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Yoni. Appreciate it. Good to be with you.